Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to start this Yevamot daf test. We're going to begin on the bottom of Ches Amud Beis. For Rabbi, Hi Oleha. When it comes to the extra word Oleha, my Avidle. What does he do with this extra word? So Meboyle Gnesanya. He needs it for the following drasha. Ein Chayavin Beistin El Al Davish Dona Kares Shgagosu Chatas. So what is this referring to? Says Rashi, L'havi par al helm davar shel tzibor. So when Klal Yisrael follows an erroneous psak of Beis Din, so they have a chiyuv of having to bring this special carbon, a par, for a helm davar shel tzibor. Now that's only in a situation, as is brought down in Staftas Harios, only in a situation where their psak, if it was bemazed, would have been kares and the shagi was chatas. V'chein hamashiach. So too, when it comes to the din of the one who is anointed, but not regarding the din of idol worship. Says Rashi, Ein chayavin sibor l'havi par l'oila v'sol chatas. That when it comes to the sibor that violates the worshiping of avodah zarah, so they do not bring a par for an ola or sa'ir as a chatas. Ella al davar shechayavin al zedani kares shgasu chatas. The only time they would do that is if it would mamish be bemazed otherwise. Rashi says, for example, zibuach v'kitur v'nisoch mishtachava. Those four types of avodos. Avol machabe, kumenashe, hugging or kissing the avodas are low. V'hach rosh shemialeha navkin mefarsh v'azal. So the only time a person is over avodah zarah to the extent is davka if it's a chiv kares those particular avodos. Utanan nami. We also learned similar to that in Masechtas Harios that kol mitzvah shebatorah shechayevan al zadon kares o shkagaso chatos. Anytime you have a situation where if it was done b'mezid as a chiv kares b'shogig a chiv to bring a carbon chatos, yachid maybe kisva. So the din is that an individual would have to bring a female kasev, o seira, or a female goat. Nasi may be sa'ir. However, a nasi, the king or the leader, he actually has to bring a male goat. Mashiach ubeisim avin par. When it comes to the anointed one as a king, so he or the Beis Din have to bring an actual par. Of avodas kachavim, when it comes to avodah zarah, that they did avodah zarah, so in that situation, the carbon for avodah zarah, which is actually explicit in Parshas Shlachacha, yachid, an individual, nasi Mashiach mavian seira. Even in this situation, the Mashiach will bring a seira for avodas kachavim. Tzibur mavian par. The tzibur will bring a par, and the sa'ir par l'oila v'soil chatas. Fine. So tzibur is mavian par v'sa'ir par l'oila v'soil chatas. So that's what they bring, those two carbonos. So minahanimili. So how do we know all this? The pasuk says v'noida hachatas asher chato leha. So Rabbi Omer never kan oleha v'nemer hoan oleha. So we have a gzer shava. Maluho and davar shachayav and ozdan kares v'yashkagaso chatas. Avkan davar shachayav and ozdan kares v'yashkagaso chatas. So this is something that we quoted in yesterday's daf in question 2. L'may asakra di oleha l'Rebbe deal of iser ereva libam mevlokach v'lokacha. He already learns out this whole din of ereva from a different source. Lokach v'lokacha. So we said. He says that it's mufne for Gzer Shava to tell us that alam davar shel tzibor demaisi al davar shel kares shkaso chatos. It's coming to tell you again when it comes to par helam davar shel tzibor, when the Beis Din gives an erroneous psak, the only time that there's these chiyuvim of these various karbanos is daf in a situation where it would be a chiv kares. So. That is what has come to tell you the Gzer Shava of Aleha. That just like when it comes to Arayas, there's a chiv kares b'mezid. So too, when it comes to helm davar shel tzibur, it's the same thing. Dafka in that situation. Ashkachan tzibur. I can understand that that's the din by tzibur Mashiach manolan dechsiv Mashiach ashmas ashim har Mashiach katzibur. So he has the same disease as a tzibur. Yachid v'nasi asim mitzvos mitzvos. The one on gzer shava. V'loy b'avodas kachavim el al davar shechayav nos dan nekaris v'ashgas achatas tzibur b'avodas kachavim. How do we know the din of tzibur? Yov me'eni me'eni gzer shava. Yachid nasi Mashiach mevi'im nefesh achas echad. Yochid ve'echad nasi ve'echad Mashiach b'mashna. And Vav, Rashi says in Ve'im Nefesh, Moisev al in Rishon v'yom atachtim mit ha'elyoin. So it's connecting the two. The fact that it's a conjunction, it's a Vav, which is an attachment. So therefore, that's the din. That it's not just by Helm Davar Shel Tzibor, but also by the Avodas Kachavim. It's the chiyuvim that are mentioned of the various karbanos is dafke if it was done b'mezid, you would be a chiv kares. Rabbanon haisvar menolahu. How the Rabbanon, since they learn aleha to teach us the whole din of arayas, so how do they know all this? So nafgahu midim makril Rabbi Yeshua lebrei, that he was saying over to his kid, Torah achas yilachem lo'isa b'shkaga. The pasuk says there's one law for the one who does b'shagig. So who should call it Torah kula avodas kachavim? We make a connection to avodah zarah. Ma avodas kachavim davar shachavim also done occurs v'al shgaso chatos. I've called davar shachavim also done occurs v'al shgaso chatos. So we learn it out through that limit, through that gzer shav. So ashkachan yachid, because that pasuk is talking about a yachid, a nefesh. So how do we know ashkachan yachid v'nasi Mashiach bein avodas kachavim bein b'shar mitzvah sibur avodas kachavim anayin? How do we know? So Amar v'im nefesh v'yom adolin metachtain. Again, the fact that it says v'im nefesh, again that vav adds and connects. V'yom el yoy metachtain el tzibur b'shar mitzvos menol and yov meini meini. Fine. So Rabbi hai Torah achas ma yavadlei. So the Rabbanan learn out from this drasha of Torah achas yilachem. So the question is now, what does Rabbi do with that pasuk? Miboy leil g'nesanya. Since we find that the Torah makes a distinction between an individual who is Oived Avodah Zarah and Merubin, says Rashi, Irani Dachas. If you have a city filled with people who worship Avodah Zarah, so there are two distinct differences when it comes to what individual worships Avodah Zarah and a majority of a city. So the Gemara says as follows: Yechidim b'skila. An individual, the punishment for avodah zarah is skila. Afikach mimoinim polat. Therefore, their money is saved. However, merubim b'sayif afikach mimoinim avad. So the din is, ban irni dachas, we actually will destroy the money. Everything is destroyed. Yachol nachlach b'karbonosein. Since we make a difference between a yachid who is avodah zarah and the siyoni dachas, maybe we should make a difference in the karbanos. Says Rashi, im avdu b'nei ir achas avodas kachavim b'shageg. If one person in the city did avodah zarah b'shageg, yihu chalukim b'karbanam shel yavi kol echad karbanos ir kiyachid. You think maybe he doesn't bring a sir kiyachid. That the din is, as Rashi, in chalukim mataris yachid el rov Yisrael or kulon. So it has to be only when there's rov Yisrael or all of them. The people in the city, they're considered to be yechidim. So look at question 3. Yechidim eskila, merubim b'sayif. Yechidim mimoinam palat, merubim mimoinim avad. So it's interesting that the death penalty is less when it comes to an individual who worships avodah zarah in a multitude group. Okay, there's certainly reason to think why that's the case, but their mimoinim is palat when it comes to a yachid. Okay, so Maskiv Rav Chilkia mi Hagroinia time because Rachmana Torah Achas Yilachem. The only reason why we say this is because the pasuk actually explicitly need this drasha. Holav Hachi Havamin and Nechalik. You would think otherwise, without the pasuk, that we should make a distinction in the karbonos that are brought. So my lesu. So what should he bring? Lesu part sibor. So he should bring a part sibor. B'shar mitzvahs hu demaisu. When it comes to other mitzvahs, he brings kisma yachid b'shar mitzvahs hu demaisu seir. So let's read this again. This is what you would think. My lesu lacy part sibor. He brings the par for the tzibor. B'shar mitzvahs hu demaisi kisba. And when it comes to other mitzvahs, he brings a female kesef. Yachid b'shar mitzvahs hu demaisi sayer. When it comes to other mitzvahs, the yachid brings a sayer, a male goat. Nasi b'shar mitzvahs hu demaisi par. U'oya b'shar lachatas. Sibor be'avodas kachavim hu demaisu. Ve'elwa maisi'ira. Yachinami hainu karbano. It's Sachat. So what's the Havamina? Hoyil v'tzibur b'hoyra maisu parlu oil v'selachatos in hunami naisu ivcha. Since when it comes to the tzibur, that's more hoyra. There's a din of par helam davar shel tzibur for an oila and a sa'ir for a chatos. So in hunami naisu ivcha. So maybe he should also bring the opposite. Inami sarich ve'in lo takana kamashmon. Maybe he needs to do it, but since there's no way of being able to do it, so he can't bring it. Kamashmuan, that there's no chiluk in the karbanis. Okay. Let's look at question TB 24. Says as follows: B'gemor Yalfina Midachsiv Torah Achas Yilachem Din Chalukin Karbonos B'nei Ir Achas. If they're one person in the city that was b'sheg b'avodah zarah mitaras yachid. We don't make a distinction between one person in the city and an individual who just worships avodah zarah. So my havamina and maisi. Why would you think there is a difference? You love kra de chalukin. So the Gemara says either. Havi maisi par chatas v'sil oila. Maybe he would bring a par for a chatas and a ser for an oila, which is the opposite of what the sibor does. Or the halamin is srichin l'havi carbon choluk. He actually has to bring a different carbon, vein lehen, but there is no other option. Hilkach ein lehem kapara, and therefore maybe he just doesn't achieve any kapara. So those are the two possible explanations. That was TB 24. Okay. Armalei Levi Rabbi. My area the Tani Tesvav Lisni Tezayin. Why do you mention 15? Lochar, you should mention 16. Armalei Kamadumali Shein Lei Moyach Bekadkadai. It's not a very nice thing. It's like you don't have a brain in your head. My daitach. So what are you thinking? Imo anusas imoi is actually the question over here, which I got wrong. Actually TA 24. Question is, Ezu erva tezayin shaloi shana rebbe mastisan. So the answer is imoi. She had nusas aviv. So if your father was ma'anes, a woman, and you're the product of that, so that's your mom. Okay? So he says like this. Let's see the words. My daitach imo anusas aviv. So maybe you're telling me the one that should be mentioned, as we just saw over here, which is TA 24, that maybe we should include anusas aviv, that your father was ma'anes, a woman. So imo anusas aviv, puta Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan hi, avuta loy kamayri. It's a machlokas, and that is not mentioned. We don't mention anything which has a machlokas in it. So look at Rashi. Imo anusas aviv. Shenasa, so what happened? So your father's ma'anis a woman, and shenasa achiv mi aviv. He ended up marrying a brother from your father, Achri Cain. So what ended up happening? Your father was ma'anis a woman, and you're the product of that. So this is your mom. And this mother ended up marrying your uncle. Umeis bulabanim, and then he died, and then your brother, the brother dies, and then she falls to her son to Yibum. So again, what is the situation? That your mother obviously is an erva to you, right? So in that situation, certainly you would not be mechuyev. So let me read this Rashi again. Shenase achiv, that she married a brother from your father, Achar Kain. So what ended up happening was she ended up marrying him, and he died. And then she falls to the son of Yibum. So it's a machlokus, as we saw before. Rabbi Yehuda oiser banusas aviv. So he said, Rabbi Yehuda asered anusas aviv, that the product, this woman who is not really is not your mother, but it's not your father's wife either. It was ma'unusasai. Now Rabbi Yehuda mishkachasla im nofelas lefnei beno liyibum el rabbanon uvanusa. Only if again it was out of wedlock. Okay. Below v'hari iser mitzvah v'iser kedusha the pligi rekiba rabbanon v'katani. We say they argue later on Daf Chaf, shel kol she'isuri iser erva. Says Rashi, anytime there's an iser erva, loy chaletzes v'omes yavemes. It says you're not allowed to do yibum, you can't do chalitza. So Rashi explains what is that. So the Mishnah over there explains it. Iser mitzvah kikun shnius midivrei sefer. Iser mitzvah is even if it's just like once removed, which is an erva a shnius. O iser kedusha kagun shenafel afanav mamzeres. Let's say it's a woman who's a mamzeres on a sina, she belav. There's a losa say of marrying her. So we say chaletzes v'lo misyavemes. So chaletzes, why do chalitza? Doi olim iser lav b'lo karis lafuki yibum legamri. It cannot be completely removed. V'lo misyavemes the hasurle. But you're not allowed to do yibum with her either. Upon Rabbi Yehuda, and he says chayvi lavin kechayvi krisos. A chayvi lav has the din of chayvi krisos, which means in that case you wouldn't even do chalitza l'chayra. The tani ezim mamzer kol shar basar shehu shel yavoi. Deish mamzer chayvi lav and Rabbi Kiva olam lav neviter beloy kulum ke'erva gemura. So Rabbi Kiva, he would say that you wouldn't do chalitza either. So here we have a machlokus when it comes to shnius arayis, or when it comes to a mamzeres, or to a nesina, whether or not you would do chalitza. So why is that? They argue over there, but Katani, but yet it's mentioned. But Pirkin Kamrinan. You're right, it is mentioned, it's later mentioned in another parak on Daf Chav. It's not mentioned in our parak. In our parak we don't have machlokus in. The Habi Shamai Matir Nesat Saras Achin Beisil Oisrin. Rashi says that Beis Shammai mattered the tsaros to the brothers. Tsaros erava misyavemas. He said, unlike what our Mishnah says, he allowed that even though I am an erava, so let's say to my daughter, but her co-wife I could do yibum with, which is totally against what our Mishnah is. Beis Hillel Oisrim. So again, that's l'chayra. Our Mishnah is only like Beis Hillel. But our Mishnah is not like Beis Shammai, it's machlokus. Our answer is the famous answer, Beis Shammai Machem Beis Hillel in a Mishnah. It's not even a machlokus. We possibly Beis Hillel. How about the case? One of the cases of our Mishnah, as we saw on Daf Beis, was a situation where you have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Now let's say it this way, Reuven and Levi. Shimon wasn't born yet. Reuven dies. So in this situation, Shimon a week later is born. All right. So at some point, we still don't allow Shimon to do yibum with Reuven's wife because he was shulub l'lamoy. Now, if she ends up marrying Levi, because Levi and Reuven were both alive at the time, and then Levi dies, so you can say, well, Shimon was alive in the time of Levi. Still, because the original Zika was connected to Reuven, so therefore, still Shimon is not to marry her. That's the din. There's no din yibum, even in a situation where Shimon is born in the time of Levi, because he wasn't alive during Reuven's lifetime, so therefore there's no Zika even afterwards. So that is the case of Eishes Achiv Shlohay Bolamai. So we continue to Testament Bays. The truth is, the pligi, there's actually a machlokus there as well. Rav Shimon v'Rabbanan v'Katani. What does that mean? Rav Shimon Polig. Actually, Rav Shimon, not like our Mishnah, argues and says Eishes Achiv Shlohay Bolamo. Later on in Daf Yud Ches, Umatzrich leChalitza. He actually says that Chalitza is necessary. That Shimon wouldn't do Yibum, but he at least would have to do Chalitza. So that goes against our Mishnah. So how can you tell me about Makam Achloikis our Mishnah doesn't mention? It's not true. Your man says, B'noylad u'b'soif yibim lo polig Rav Shimon. If he was born and then only afterwards Yibum was done, in that situation Rav Shimon does not disagree. In that case, he agrees. Says Rashi. What does that mean? Heichademes Reuven blo banim. Right, as we said, Reuven died and he has no children. His wife, therefore, is Zokuk. V'ad shel Yibma. But before Yibum took place, Shimon noylad. Shimon actually was born. Now, Shimon was born after Reuven died, but Va'ad shelo Yavma Shimon noylad Levi achihem. Va'oid zekukul Yavam. So she's zokuk to the Yavam. V'haiselo asura b'nefil azumishim eshes achar shulhai belwamoy. So he wasn't alive at that time. V'yima Shimon. So then Shimon did Yibum. So again, the way Rashi says is V'ad shelo Yavma Shimon noylad Levi achihem. So Levi was not around, but Levi was born before Shimon did Yibum. So Shimon did Yibum. Now the din is that if Shimon would die afterwards, it's still a case of Shulhai Belomo. Vayima Shimon umeis blo banim, and let's say he died without kids. Moder Rav Shimon shasura levi. She would still be usher to Levi. Hoyel v'nesrol of sha'achas b'nefila rishayna. Since she was usher even for a moment b'nefila rishayna. The chi polig Rav Shimon. The only time Rav Shimon argues, b'yibum Shimon as Eishes Reuven. If let's say Shimon did yibum with Reuven's wife, because Reuven died, and then v'achar hach noed Levi. Then Levi was born. Umei Shimon the hasim sharli Rav Shimon liyavume. In that situation, interesting enough, he would allow Levi to do yibum. D'lo naful afana mekayach Reuven achiv shemes kvar. Because Reuven was already so much out of the picture, the Yibum really was connected now to the new brother, because he was never alive. So it's interesting. There's a chiluk. If the boy was born before the second brother did Yibum, so in that situation, even if Shimon agrees that he would not be able to do Yibum, because it's connected to the original brother. However, in a situation where he was born much afterwards, the first brother died, is totally out of the picture. The second brother married her, did Yibum, and then the brother was born. Then, if his brother dies, then he could do Yibum. So it's true that there may be a machlokas, but the case of our Mishnah may be discussing the situation where it's not a machlokas. Okay. But Noilud, if he was born, and then only afterwards the brother did Yibam, little Paul Rav Shimon, he even agrees in that situation for sure it's not good. But he holds that he disagrees even in that case. So on this he asks a question. Asur l'zeh muteres l'zeh. V'achoyse sheyevimta choletes o misyavemes. So if you have a situation as follows, you have 4 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Now, Shimon and Levi are, they both die, but they both have wives. So in a normal situation, you would say that Reuven and Yehuda, the remaining living brothers, should be able to do yibum on these 2 women. The problem is that Reuven was connected to one of these 2 women, Leah and Rachel. One of them was his erva. By the way, Leah and Rachel, these 2 women were also sisters, and therefore there's an erva as one sister to Reuven, but the other is actually going to be mutter. So one is mutter and one is aser, because one is an erva and one is mutter. There weren't saras; they're not co-wives. Each Shimon and Levi were only married to one of them each. So even though Reuven can't do yibum with one, he could do yibum with the other. So that's what it means. That there could be a case of muteres l'zeh v'asur l'zeh, muteres l'zeh v'asur l'zeh. And we can establish this actually in all the cases in our Mishnah. It says v'achosa, and the fact that these 2 girls, Rachel and Leah, were sisters, sheyevimta choletes o misyavemes. So we say that the other 2 brothers, Reuven or Yehuda, they can even do yibum if they wish. Yehuda matargim mechamaso ve'elech. He says you can only make this drasha from the part of our Mishnah which talks about the mother-in-law and on. However, the first 6 not. My time kivan debito b'oinsin mishkachas b'nesuin lo mishkachas lo b'nesuin kamari b'oinsin loy kamari. So in our Mishnah, it's not talking about cases of oinsin, even though it's bito about usasai. So according to him, he says that all these cases cannot be established in an event that we're talking about anything unless it's marriage. However, if the relationships are only because of wedlock, so that's not going to be brought in the Mishnah. So therefore, both Reuven and Yehuda, let's say, they both had bito, they both had daughters. Leah and Rachel, they both had daughters. Each of them had a daughter, but it was me anusasai. It was out of wedlock. It was not through marriage, because if it was through marriage, then the other couldn't marry because of eshes ach. So because of the issue of eshes ach, since there's 2 sisters involved, so there's an issue that you would not be able to marry your brother's wife. So since it's not talking about your brother's wife, because it's not your wife, the problem is that our Mishnah doesn't mention any of those cases except for the cases of marriage. And therefore, our Mishnah does not mention any of that. And of course, this you can see this Rashi, which goes through every one of the 15 cases, which certainly would be unbelievable to go through. Ayin Sham. V'Abaye matargim af bito manusasai. Now Abaye learns that our Mishnah is also talking about, as we established before, because it says bito and then it says bito manusasai. So one of the erevas is if it's your daughter not through marriage but through wedlock. Kivan di ashkuchi mishkachasla. Since we do find that iboy min ha'oinsin tehava, iboy min nesuin tehava. That's why we said it has to be 2 separate cases, otherwise it seems redundant. So one is talking about marriage and one is talking about through wedlock. However, the case of eshes achiv shelo haibelamo, that we cannot establish. My taima kivan do Rav Shimon hu de mishkachas lo rabbanan do Rav Shimon hu de mishkachas lo. According to Rav Shimon, you can find it because according to Rav Shimon, he's lenient and he says that certain times his brother is allowed to marry. Or rabbanan lo mishkachas lo, but plot lo kamairi. Again, we don't want to mention any situations of machlokes. So Sapir Matargim af eshes achiv shelo haibelamo, that he actually says this case as well. Mishkachas la b'shisa achin v'libd Rav Shimon. And he says if it's 6 brothers, and according to the sheet of Rav Shimon, who again is lenient when it comes to this situation, the simanech, as we continue in Aleph, meis noilad v'yibem, that he died, then he gave birth, and the Yibum died, gave birth to had Yibum. That is the mnemonic to be able to understand the situation. Elo Rabbi Hani Kloli Leisley. So we just end up saying that he doesn't hold these kloms. This is Rashi, Rav Chia. Hilkach lo mukma masnisim bepluta el benoilad masayv yibim l'divrei hakoil. Very simply, that he wants to establish it l'divrei hakol. That's talking about a situation where noilad, where he was born, and then only afterwards his brother did yibum on the girl. L'divrei hakol, even Rav Shimon holds that would not work. Namely, you would not be able to, after that brother dying, you would not be able to do Yibum, even according to the Shita of Rav Shimon. So therefore, instead of possibly coming up with another situation, we'd rather just say that is the case of our Mishnah, and therefore it is, again, not a situation where there is a machlokas. Okay, let's see if there's any more questions over here. Okay, not TA. Let's see, question TB. Ezu Erev Hoisev Levi Betani Shesh Esri Nashim Paitrais. So Imo Anusas Aviv. So again, the case of the mother, which was your mother, which is your father was ma'anis her. The Alvar Achiv, and your brother violated Vanasa Anusas Aviv. So this is talking about a situation where your brother married her. Now, he wasn't supposed to. He was over that. He wasn't allowed to, but he did. And in that situation, she's an Erev to. But nonetheless, we don't mention that case because Bapluta lo Kamairi. Okay. Fine. Question 4. Yaakov onas beis achiyos. So Yaakov engaged in wedlock with 2 sisters, the Yoldulo as Levi Yehuda, and they ended up having two boys. Nasa Ruvain, Anusas Aviv. So Ruvain married the Anusas Aviv, Imo Shel Levi, with the mother of Levi. But Shimon Nasa Anusas Aviv Imo Shel Yehuda, which they were not supposed to again. Umeisa Reuven v'Shimon v'Nafal nishosein lifnei Levi v'Yehuda mahadin matam. So the question is, they were avar. They should not have married Anusas Aviv, but they did. So the din is shteim paturos min achalitzim neyibum. Lafi sheshtei hanashim asuros mishum erev alehem achas mishum imo v'hashniya achas imai. Adkan.